Good evening. I'm Ken Ashworth, your host this evening for another presentation by a resident here at Westminster. Our guest this evening is Jack Collins, a new resident here, Nancy. And Jack, you've been here how long
A
now?
little over a month, about 6 weeks now.
About 6 weeks now.
Mhm.
So Jack is a new resident here. This evening we're going to talk about football with an insider, someone who has already been in the field, played football. Jack, I don't want to embarrass you by talking much this evening about your career 60 years ago at UT and in the pros, but there are a number of us here who live here, a lot of people here who enjoy football. A number of us here don't understand all the strategies and everything that goes on in the background. So we appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this evening as an insider, and your willingness to talk to us about
I was an insider 60 years ago, so there have been a few changes, but no, a lot of it hasn't changed too. But
Well, tell us a little bit about how you got interested in this. You grew up in Dallas, is
I
that
grew up in Dallas, and my father had played football at Texas in the 30s, so he got me interested in sports at an early age, and I was always a Longhorn fan. But in Dallas, growing up, when I did, SMU was really good. They had a running back by the name of Doak Walker that was a three-time All-American. He was my hero. So
Yeah.
for a brief period of time, I wanted to go to SMU until I had a chance to come to Texas.
Now, Bobby Lane was from that area too.
Bobby Lane, both of them went to the same high school I did, and which was kind of unique because I later met Bobby when I had a chance to spend a short time in Pittsburgh with the Pittsburgh
Yeah.
Steelers.
Well, we'll come back and ask a couple of questions about that as we go along, but you mentioned earlier that football has changed a lot in the years since you played. Let's talk about some of those changes. One thing you mentioned to me when we talked informally was something about playing both ways. Can you explain what that's
Yeah, you didn't have platoon system when I was there. I mean, you had to play offense and defense, and I don't remember the details of the limited substitution rules, but like I could come out one time during each quarter. And if I came out twice, you had to sit on the bench. You couldn't go back in until the second quarter. So that made everybody had to learn how to play both ways. And it was a big drawback to specialty type players, somebody that was like a field goal kicker and couldn't do anything else. You had to really pick an important time to put somebody like that in there because they were going to have to play another position too.
Wow. And you said that you just mentioned kicking. Now you said you were also the punter.
I was the punter. Punted for 3 years, and I kicked a few extra points, but back then we had somebody else that did that and played both ways too.
Yeah. So if there was no kickoff team.
Yeah, we had a kickoff team, and I think you lined up on the 40-yard line and kicked down to the goal line, but everybody didn't kick it over the goal like they do this day and time. Most all the kickoffs were kicked and run back.
How about the size of players? It looks like there's been a big change.
Big difference. The biggest guy on our team was a lineman who weighed about 230 pounds. And I was a running back, pretty big for a running back, 195 at that time. But we had linemen that didn't weigh much more than I did.
Yeah.
So the emphasis, at least on Royals teams, was quickness. And he thought somebody that could move around, could get position on a heavier guy and move him out of the way just enough to get things opened up.
Well, you don't look like You don't look like you're 195 now.
No, I'm down to about 168 now.
Well, good.
After I finished playing football, just for health reasons, I started jogging a lot and lost down to about 160 and have stayed there. The only bad thing there, I had to have a knee replacement. I never did have that bad of an injury in football.
Well, how much do the players weigh today?
Well, a running back weighed 230 pounds, kind of like our large lineman did.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's the training techniques. They have weights that when they're not playing football, they have coaches that work them out with weights to build muscle mass. And we never lifted weights. And that came in, I guess, about the late 60s when the training techniques started better.
So when you mention playing both ways, playing defense and offense, these big players, that takes a lot of stamina. And when you're carrying that much weight,
Yeah, well, you don't find, there were no 300-pounders back then. Maybe the pros had one or two, but most of the college players didn't weigh much more than they did in Texas.
Yeah. You mentioned to me that one of the things that coaches encouraged then was spearing. What was spearing?
Well, we were taught to lead with our helmet. I mean, not your head down, but your eyes up and aim for the chest. And then you would usually slide off on your shoulder pads. But I don't know how they do it this day and time, because a lot of times it's just unavoidable. But we weren't taught to hurt anybody, but you were taught to lead with your helmet.
Yeah.
They're not taught that anymore.
Well, when you were in college and when I was still at UT, you found athletes who could get more than one letter. They didn't letter in just football.
Right.
Now that's a big change now.
That is a big change. I was talking earlier, my father played here in the 30s and lettered in football, track, and basketball. And
4 letters?
3 letters.
3 letters.
There was 2-time letterman, a lot of them when I was in college, but back then you would come to school, you'd have football season, then when football was out, you wouldn't have to report again until the spring. You got about 3 weeks of spring training, and then you went home for the summer and had summer jobs and came back. But now it's a full-time job. These kids now report, in the early part of the summer, they're here all year and going through a weight type program, and there's just no time off for them to do anything else.
Well, let's talk about coaches a little bit. What difference do coaches really make?
Well, there's a fine line between the good and the bad, and I wish I knew the secret. I know I was fortunate to play for Darrell Royal. I was in his 2nd recruiting class. The year before I got down here, Texas didn't win a football game. In his first year, they won 6 or 7 games, and then we didn't win less than 10 after that. But he was a disciplinarian, not a crack the whip, but just very well organized. And he had a lot of rules that sometimes you had to learn the hard way. Like we couldn't cut class. I mean, if you cut class and you weren't sick, well, you had to meet Frank Medina, the trainer, down at the stadium steps at 6 o'clock in the morning and run up and down the stadium steps with a blocking dummy for 20 times. And I don't care if it was a week of a game or what.
Wow.
But it was an honor system, and it really worked, because I don't think too many people did it any more than one time.
You mentioned to me that Royal, really, you thought was a man of high integrity.
I sure did. He always held everybody accountable, and he wasn't a crack the whip, hell brimstone type guy, but you knew
Yeah.
who was boss.
What were the recruitment practices back in those days?
Well,
How did you get recruited, for example?
I was easy because I wanted to come to Texas. But no, there was a lot of the same type of deal. To my knowledge, the University of Texas has never been in trouble for violating recruiting rules, like giving
Yep.
cars and gifts and like that to other players.
Right.
So, you know, all of that hadn't changed much. I don't think there's as much of it that goes on now. But
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you about one particular game, and that's the Cotton Bowl with Syracuse. Just by coincidence, I had graduated in 1958, and I was enrolled at Syracuse,
oh, really?
and my job was to be dorm monitor for the football team.
Oh,
So I never told them that I was a UT graduate that year.
yeah.
Maybe I should have put something in their drinks. Talk about that ball game.
Well, Syracuse, it was a great year for them. They were national champs, and back then you didn't have the national championship game like they do now in a playoff system. But we met them in the Cotton Bowl. Back then you had 4 big games: the Cotton Bowl, Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and the Orange Bowl.
That's right.
And there weren't too many more games, so it was a real honor to play in one of those games. And they were undefeated, and we had lost 1 game that year. And so we met them in the Cotton Bowl, and we gave them a good game. We lost by 8 points, I think, but I have a lot of good memories of that game.
You also have a memento from that, don't you?
I do. We have in fact, I wore it now. Everybody got a watch back then, and this was a 1960 Cotton Bowl watch, Hamilton, that still runs, still works. In fact, I had given it to my father, and he wore it for many years, and when he died, I decided, well, I'll wear that again. And I took it to the watch shop down here about a year ago just to get it tuned up, and oh, they just were fabulous. They wanted that watch. They thought it was neat. But no, that's a memento that has really lasted through the years.
That's 60 years old.
Yeah, that's right.
That's something. Talking about memento, let's back up to Royal. You said that he insisted on students not cutting classes.
Right.
He encouraged graduation.
Absolutely. He came in, and to my knowledge, was the first coach to install a brain coach, what he called him. A guy named Lan Hewitt that lived in Austin, was principal of a high school here, but Coach Royal hired him away to be in charge of making sure the players got their courses and went to school and just was in charge of it. So, and then he brought with him a rule that, not a rule, but an honor that if you lettered and then you graduated from school, you got a T-ring. I think I might have brought mine here. I was trying to try to put it on because I couldn't get it off.
Yeah.
But this is Roy. In fact, Royal bought these for all the players that graduated. So when I see these around, I'm always honored to have it, and I wear them to all. I wear it to all the UT games for luck.
That's
But
great.
they still do this, to my knowledge, and I think maybe they do it in other sports now too.
It's a great motivator.
Yeah.
Good.
And there have been players that have been out for, I'm talking about All-Americans that have been out for several years that never did graduate, that have come back and graduated just to get this ring.
Let me ask you about a spoiler, the TCU game.
TCU, that would have been 1961, and that comes up every year. But we were number 1 in the nation. That was our next to last game. We had won every game by about 3 or 4 touchdowns that year. TCU had a good team, but not a great team. They had lost 3 or 4 games. And we met out here, I think it was a cold, sleety type day. And for whatever reason, we were frozen. They beat us 6-0. We didn't even score a touchdown.
6-0.
And that comes up all the time.
Well, I remember Darrell Royals' comment about that when he was asked what he thought of TCU, and he said, TCU's like cockroaches. It's not how much they eat, it's what they fall in and mess up.
That was Darrell Royal. He had a lot of sayings like that. My favorite one that I remember that he had, you know, this day and time you see all the hot dogging goes on and you score a touchdown, you're doing all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't have lasted a game. He'd have thrown us out. He always said, after you cross that goal line, act like you've been there before.
That's good, good.
And,
But how about coaches' salaries?
you know, he was 32 years old when he came to Texas, and I don't know what his salary was, but I don't think he ever made any more than $100,000.
Really?
Just from a pure salary. Now at UT, he got a lot on the side from, you know, wealthy donors that might buy him. I don't know what all they bought, but
Yeah.
he did all right through the years.
Yeah. There's a story about Steven Weinberg, the Nobel laureate at the
Yeah.
University of Texas. Louise was, his wife was recruited by the law school, and he decided he'd follow her. She came here. So they started talking to him about salary, and they said, well, Dr. Weinberg, we can guarantee you, if you'll come, that you will never make less than the president. And he said, could you make that the football coach? They couldn't meet that obligation.
No, I'll tell you what, I guess it got going and it never slowed down because it's just gotten ridiculous now.
Yeah.
And
then they've got guaranteed sessions years ahead too.
well, they're still paying for fired coaches' contracts over there.
Yeah, terrible.
But as long, I guess, as the alumni
Yeah.
fork up the money, they'll probably get that done.
Well, let's talk about some terms in football. A lot of us had heard this term about Hail Mary pass. You know,
Yeah.
what is that?
Hail Mary pass is nothing but just a drop back pass and like you're going to throw it, and running back comes by and takes it away from you and goes around.
I thought that was called the Statue of Liberty.
Well, that's a Statue of the Liberty, but the Hail Mary, you're right, I'm sorry. Hail Mary is last play of the game, you just throw it as far as you can and try to catch it in the end zone and hope somebody catches it.
Now, when you played, I looked a little bit about your background, and they described it, that the formation at that time was called a flip-flop. What's a flip-flop?
Flip-flop is nothing more than, we ran the wing T, which you have a wing back and then you have running back and a quarterback back there, but they got the bright idea of the flip-flop. If it was something 28 right, with all the linemen would have the same blocking. If it was 28 left, the lineman would just change positions and go to the other side. So it cut down on the amount of assignments you'd have to learn, and because if you were on the right side, you blocked one way. If you were on the left side, and you'd have to learn a different blocking scheme on that side for the same play, and you didn't have to anymore.
Yeah. Now, you played halfback?
I was a running back, and then I guess I was a wingman. I played that my last year.
Did you pass any?
I passed on a running pass. The team didn't pass very many. If you threw it 8 passes a game, that was a lot back then because it was primarily designed to run. And there were a few teams in college football that had open style passing, but that came in later.
Yeah, Ron used to say when you pass, three bad things can happen.
Three things can happen, two of them are bad.
Two of them are bad, yeah, so. What was the wishbone?
Well, the wishbone is, that was designed if you have good, quick, big running backs. It's just a quick hitting position where the fullback is right behind the quarterback, and then he's got halfbacks on each side.
I see.
And I never did play in that position, but it's a good deceptive running type position, but it's pretty hard to be too effective passing out of that.
But it was very hard to defend against.
Oh yeah, it took them a couple of years to catch on how to defend it.
Well, the purpose of something like this is to surprise the defense.
Yeah.
Does the defense ever have a way of surprising the offense?
Yeah, you usually would watch film of what they did, but usually there was they saw certain players had tendencies to do certain things on plays, and they might design something just to go right at that particular player. And
Well,
the coaches are scheming all the time, but really what it boils down to in the end, though, you just gotta go knock somebody over and tackle somebody.
yeah.
Blocking and tackling is the real
blocking it.
base of it.
And when you were playing both ways, you had to be especially good at tackling.
Yeah.
What's the difference? One more question here on formations and terms and everything. What's the difference between man-to-man and zone?
Well, zone, if you got three defensive backs, I've got the right side of the field. And then if somebody cuts across and goes to the middle, you've got help in the middle. And a zone is a little easier for a back to, rather than having to run all over the place with one person. So,
yeah.
But most schools have a mixture, play both ways.
Well, now you said you played both ways.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, which one did you like best?
I liked offense best. I like carrying the ball best. I didn't like hitting people that much.
Well, but you got hit a lot.
I got hit a lot, yeah.
Yeah, okay, you did. Let's talk a little bit about injuries, equipment, training.
Well, I was fortunate. I never was seriously hurt, but I was hurt most of my junior year. I had a real good. That's another thing why I thought about it. Freshman, you didn't play as a freshman. You had a freshman team, and you had a 5-game schedule. So it was sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So my junior years, when I got a knee injury right at the first of the year, it wasn't serious enough to have it operated on, but it's like a bad sprained ankle or something. It took a while before you could do much on it. But only thing I ever broke was my nose.
You must have been spearing.
I think that actually somebody's helmet came down and cracked my nose. But back then, though, if you had even a torn cartilage or something like that, which they could fix and you'd be back on the field in a couple of weeks now, that was sometimes a series that would end your career.
Yeah.
So they've learned so much more. And I think a lot of the weight training that they did and all of that, was the improvement on how they train has prevented a lot of that type of stuff.
Well, you talk about, they learned a lot about training. Bear Bryant, for example, took the A&M football game down to Junction,
Right.
the team down to
Right.
Junction, and he wouldn't give them water if they weren't working up to the standards he wanted. Now they've learned something about that.
That was crazy. And we didn't have a lot of water breaks at Texas either until my last year. Following my last year, 62, is when they had a kid die of a heat stroke here and at SMU.
Oh.
And things really began to change at that time.
Who enforced discipline?
Um, Frank Medina was our trainer. Frank had been trainer, I don't know, at Texas for a number of years, but he had Royals here and whatever. Frank would, a big lineman, and maybe was out of shape or overweight, and he'd lock him in the weight room or the sweat room and never would let him out. Sometimes they would take him up to Round Rock and let him out, and they'd have to walk back to Austin.
Oh, wow.
That type of deal. But it, we didn't have a whole lot of discipline type situation when I was there. Most of the people they knew what they were there for, and we all wanted to win.
Yeah.
And that we did.
When you look back at pictures and what I remember from that era, it looked like everybody's wearing the same padding. And now you look at these teams and it looks like some of the running backs have very little padding compared to the linemen.
I don't understand it. No, we at the very least, we had knee pads, thigh pads. A lot of these running backs now don't do that. Shoulder pads everybody still has those.
Well, how about helmets and shoes and cleats? What changes?
Well, the shoes, the only thing that changed there, they're probably lighter. And we didn't play on AstroTurf fields, so we had regular cleats.
Yeah.
And I think the helmets are certainly sturdier and more protected than they were then. And until my sophomore year, we didn't have face masks. And that was a big deal. That first one they came out with was a bar not much bigger than my finger.
Yeah.
That's when I broke my nose.
Well, aside from damage to the head and brain, what are the principal injuries that occur?
I think back then probably knees. Knees were one of the worst, and of course the typical pull muscles in your legs and things like that. But never. We were fortunate, never had anybody that had a serious neck injury or anything like that.
Well, Jack, looking back on your career, how do you size it up from where you are now? What kind of place?
If I had to do over again, I wouldn't have changed a lot. I would have come to Texas. I just felt very fortunate to get to be around the people I did. Darrell Royal, met a lot of good alums through the years. I think opened up some doors for me in other fields like banking that I got in and spent my career in.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to that. But immediately after graduating, you got grabbed by the pros. Want to tell us about that?
Yeah. I'd always thought it'd be neat to play pro football, and never thought about that much without having an opportunity. But my senior year, I got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Houston Oilers. You had the old AFL and NFL league. I decided to sign with Pittsburgh, and the money back then is not anything like it is now, I can assure you. But I did get $3,000 to sign a contract, which in 1962, that was a lot of money. And then I signed a contract for $13,000 for the year, which took me a while to make that after I went into banking. And I went through training camp with Pittsburgh, West Liberty, West Virginia, and things didn't work out there. But I got picked up by the Cowboys and spent a year there on what they call the reserve squad. I never played in a league type game, but I worked out, did everything else. And, after that year tried to look, well, did I really want to do that for my living the rest of my life?
Yeah.
And had gotten married, and one thing led to another, and I decided maybe I need to look for something else to do.
Yeah. Was Nancy disappointed when you made the change?
No, but she was certainly wide open to letting me do what I wanted to do. And, you know, I did the right thing, but still you wonder, you have regrets, and if you would have been in the right place at the right time, how would that have worked out?
Yeah.
But the lifestyle, even though the Dallas Cowboys were number one with Tom Landry as the head coach, and the type of people that he got around him, that would have been a great place to play. But after 1 year, I decided to had an opportunity to go to work on a training program for a bank in Dallas, and that's what I did.
Well, tell us a little bit about the transition. How did that work out? How to transition to banking, and why did you pick banking?
I spent, well, I guess I'd made that decision right at the end of the training camp. That second year I was there, and I was in transition, and I didn't know for sure what I wanted to do. And so I decided to go to SMU and take some courses, took a couple of banking courses. Mm-hmm. And it was during that semester that I met some people from Republic National Bank and knew somebody that worked there, and got interested. And you know, my life up till then, and really until after I graduated, had always been focused on sports, and I did the academics to get there so I could do that, but it changed around. Then I just went whole hard for learning all I could about my accounting and finance and all that type of stuff, and had an opportunity then to go to work for Republic Bank on a training program, and that was in '64, and I was in banking up until about 45 years or so.
Yep. Well, Jack, you've made this a really fun interview. I really enjoyed it. I think your neighbors here, I think, will enjoy it.
Well, I hope so. I don't pretend to be a football expert or anything like that, but it's been good to me, and I enjoyed and was just thankful to have the opportunity to be able to play and to talk about it now.
Well, it's been helpful to us to talk to somebody on the inside.
Yeah.
And find out your views on some of this. I'm so glad you have such, and I think we all are so glad you have such good memories about it, and some great mementos too. And so thanks for your candor and this information. And
all right, well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, we want to thank our guest this evening, Jack Collins. And since he's in the field of banking, and we have a lot of bankers here, maybe we ought to get you together with some of the bankers sometime and have a program here on the straight skinny on the inside on banking as well. So with that, I want to thank you, Jack, and we'll terminate this interview. Thank you.
Thank you.